Recently, Zoho has introduced a brand new browser called Oola. And the question begs, why? Why do we need another browser in the market? To answer that question, we're talking to Tejas Gadhia, the Zoho Evangelist for Oola, to figure out what it means to the enterprise market. Tejas, thanks for joining me for this conversation that I think is going to be really, really fascinating because this is, I think, really new territory, not only for Zoho, but I think, as we'll get into, is sort of indicative of sort of this new movement or this new kind of space in the entire industry. Zoho is officially announcing the release of a new browser called Oola, which I don't know, well, maybe you can tell me why the name Oola, but the obvious question I think everyone would be asking is why? Why another browser? There's a million browsers out there right now, and clearly some really, really big ones. So why is Zoho bringing a new browser to market?
Yeah, I'll start with the name Oola is actually like a Tamil word, which is the language of the state where our headquarters is in India. It means like path or journey, which is kind of like what Safari means, Internet Explorer. It's all about exploring things. So that's where the name comes from. As far as why the browser, it's really the gatekeeper for everything we do. We make cloud-based apps, all those are accessed through a browser, and the browser itself being the gatekeeper means that there's a lot of optimizations we can do for our own services in our own browser, but also we can do a lot to protect our users by providing them a browser that actually cares about their privacy and their security more so than other browsers do.
So let's double click into the privacy question because I think it's an interesting one from a couple of perspectives. Clearly, there's some industry momentum around it. There are a handful of very privacy-centric browsers out there like Brave and a few others. Safari or Apple has certainly made some noise around privacy. But I would argue, particularly in the market you play in the mid-market and enterprise space, the jury's still sort of out about how much people care about privacy. Clearly, it's something that Zoho is very invested in. So give us the background, the why, and why do you feel that privacy is so important that you've really anchored this browser around this whole idea of privacy?
Yeah, I think the idea of privacy really comes around mostly consent. What happens in a browser is you're tracked in so many different ways. We can track idle times, we can track active tabs, we can track locations. Each browser gets a unique ID combined with your web search history and your Google account you're logged in or your Facebook account you're logged in. All of these attributes get plugged in together and we can identify a browser and give it a super unique ID. So even if you're not logged in, you're in incognito mode, you're still tracked. And so all that happens in the background, no one has any idea for it. Most people think of privacy like a personalized ad. Yeah, it's personalized ad, but it's kind of creepy when someone's following you around with the camera basically all day long on everything you search, and that's how the ad is getting personalized. And so because all this tracking that happens in browsers is happening on the back end, that you don't opt into anything, there's no like consent screen that says like I agree to get tracked. That's kind of like the problem we have. Like if people want to opt in, you should be able to opt in. And we even have a version of the browser that lets people, get tracked basically. But by default, I don't think people should be exposed to basically that kind of surveillance without consent, really.
One of the things that I was struck with when I saw this, so you guys have been talking about this for a while, and I'll be honest, I was somewhat skeptical, like would you actually bring this to market? The thing I was really struck by is that it sort of puts you in rarefied air. And what I mean by that is there are, as we mentioned, lots of browsers out there. But there are really only 3 other players in the market that have an entire suite of like an enterprise platform play and then have a browser that is the gateway into that, as you said, and that is Microsoft, Apple and their Safari browser, and Google. Those are 3 giant organizations. Is this intentional? Are you trying to play as a platform in this space?
Yeah, there's also something that all 3 of those have in common. All of them are fairly committed to their entire ad-based business model. So Google obviously on Google Ads, Microsoft and Bing ads, Apple big move in App Store search ads, and so it's a little conflicting to say that I don't think any of them really. I think Safari touts privacy and they do a lot of good work there, but it is still some level of conflict because the more privacy protections you put in place for your users, on the back end you're getting hurt somewhere. So the incentives are not really aligned. And then the idea of like an enterprise application play plus browser play is important, but I don't think anybody's really made the tight integration that has been available and should have been probably innovated on for a while now. It's not like Microsoft apps work any better in an Edge browser. It's not like Google Mail is any better in Chrome than it is in other browsers. There's no like deep, real product integration from the web app to the browser, and that's just a really like, I guess, missed opportunity.
Well, it actually points to what you were talking about, that in many cases that's because the whole reason people wanted the browser, I mean, let's talk very specifically about Google and Chrome. They entered that space specifically because they wanted to capture that point of entry for their ad tech. So it does kind of raise the question. There's a certain case to be made that the platform play actually sort of stands in conflict with the privacy play. The DuckDuckGos and the Braves, their whole shtick is that we're completely separate from everybody. So how is Zoho sort of reconciling these two almost counterpoints?
I mean, I'd say like DuckDuckGo and Brave are both doing good things in terms of like pushing privacy forward, but at the end of the day, they got to make money too. And the only way they can make money is selling ads. And they can sell, privacy-friendly ads, but you're still in ads. And at a certain point, some investors are going to come back and say, hey, we need to make some more money. Maybe let's tune down this privacy a little bit, milk a little bit more money. For us, we make our money from software. This is just like, I would almost call it like maybe a public service, really. We're just trying to help people out, make a browser that protects their privacy, gives them what they want, and doesn't subject people to the kind of surveillance that they're used to from free apps. Because everyone knows that like if you're getting something for free, you're the product, and that's absolutely the case in the browser world.
Part of the argument I make when we have these conversations in the industry about privacy is that it's one of those things that we all sort of talk about. It sounds like common sense. Of course, I want my privacy protected. I don't want to have a surveillance economy and all of that. And yet, as consumers, as businesses, we want the convenience that personalization creates. That's why these platforms are, in fact, so effective in many cases. And so, again, my question, how is Zoho sort of striking that balance? If you are not tracking everything, am I giving up some of that convenience?
Yeah, I guess you probably are giving up a little bit of convenience there, but not in, I would say, not in the work ecosystem really, but in a personal realm, that's kind of why we made this idea of modes. I'm sure we can get into, but we have like a personal version mode basically that lets you browse, and I wouldn't say like makes you exposed to surveillance and tracking, but is a little bit more liberal. And then there's like a work mode that's a little bit more locked down. There's like a kids mode that's like obviously super locked down. A developer mode for like debugging and actually building apps, and then an open season mode, which is just free for all. You can track me, which is basically just like a Chrome without any modifications.
Let's explain this a little bit, because even somebody in the space, when I first saw it, I missed what these were. So can you describe what this idea of work modes are? I don't know if you call them work modes.
Modes, yeah.
And how they work.
Some people might be familiar that like mostly Chrome, I guess, kind of pioneered this, but you have an idea of like multiple profiles. So you can be logged into like one Gmail account or one, Chrome profile. It may have like a version of like tabs and where you do work, and then another profile for a different account you're logged into and stuff like that. Modes are kind of like a subset of these profiles. So you can still have multiple profiles in Oola, but then inside of each one of those, each person is doing different things on the browser. Sometimes you're working, sometimes you're personally browsing, sometimes your kids are using your computer, sometimes you're testing an application you've built, and sometimes you're just browsing around, doing whatever. And so we have these different modes that each have different functionality that's kind of optimized for it. So in your personal mode, there'd be social media tracking and stuff like that. We're kind of a little bit more focused in that area. In the work mode, we'll make sure that we have the right plugins and extensions in place that enhance work productivity. Maybe things like a work timer, a focus timer, notebook extension, annotator for taking videos and screenshots and stuff like that, and a lot of different ones on the way. And then your kids mode is locked down. You password protect it. Kids come in. You can't exit kids mode until you put a password out. You can play games in there, YouTube videos that are for kids. Like it's just very stripped down with the websites you can access. Developer mode has a bunch of developer features for testing like accessibility of an application. Like even a good example is the blind mode, I guess, for people who like visually can't see. Being able to like test that in a Chrome browser is not easy. You got to like dig through a bunch of settings and like switch off a bunch of flags and like the settings that nobody really wants to get through. So we've optimized it so all these accessibility testing, multiple versions of browsers simulated inside that browser makes it just better to test and easier for, it's like a developer's browser, which doesn't really exist right now. And then the last one, open season, free for all, do whatever you want.
So I think it's a really fascinating concept of this, because if I'm translating that, what you're really doing is you're tuning the privacy settings more than anything else. I mean, maybe some other stuff, but really tuning the privacy settings for sort of the modality that someone is browsing the internet with. But I guess the question is how are you sure you're getting that right?
What we do is we have this thing called, I want to say like smart URL switching, more or less kind of the term. But basically, anytime you go to a URL, let's say you go to Zoho.com, that's work stuff. So then it'll automatically port you to the work mode. Maybe you go to Facebook.com, that's a personal thing, go into Facebook.com. So we'll set up a bunch of rules and like suggestions for popular business websites or cloud apps. It'll route you to that right place. For kids apps, it might route you to kids. For social media and news and stuff, it might route you to personal. So we offer like smart suggestions that way to kind of guide the user into making the right choice. So whenever you go to a link, you can easily say, open this link or this domain, basically always in this mode, because that's where I'm getting that work done. It is a little bit of a shift in how you work. You have to kind of change your mindset a little bit. Once you get used to it, you can really like navigate between like personal and work and like keep them separate. And then you realize why it is important to keep them separate. Because one thing that happens is like, let's say your browser has access to everything. If you're in like your CRM system and you have your leads and your contacts or whatever, the browser has access to really the data that came in there is going through the browser. And then you tie that into a social media account. And now all that's kind of mix and match. Your work life and your personal life are being blended, and that creates your profile. And so by separating them, it really creates a little bit of just personalization, almost better personalization, because you're not mixing and matching two different things.
So I'm just having this aha moment. I'm supposed to separate my work and personal lives?
Sometimes.
Is what you're saying?
That's the word on the street. I don't know.
I'm doing a bad job of that, apparently. You did say something that was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me that I want to dig into a bit. You said that, that you have the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts, and that their applications, their platforms, in fact, don't actually run any different or better in their browsers. Does that imply that yours does?
Yeah, so we've got a couple like pre-built like Zoho extensions already in there. So something called Zoho Notebook, which lets you like do like web clipping and automatically summarizing like content on a web page through some AI extensions, and has like a little side widget bar that basically is always available whenever you want it to be. There's another thing called Zoho Annotator, easy way to take screenshots, mark them up, blur out content that's private, record videos, share them, upload them directly, whatever. There's more on the way for like CRM and mail and whatever. So we're bringing a lot of these like extensions. And the good thing about extensions in general is any Chrome extension works here. Anything available in the Chrome web store, you can do it. We'll make a Zoho web store as well, which will have more personalized privacy like focused extensions. People can build their own extensions that maybe are optimized for it. I'd say like it's more like the tip of the iceberg. We're starting with a few, but we're gonna make our apps obviously run a lot better on the browser. A lot more native integration. Offline capabilities help a lot there.
So if everything you've said has not convinced somebody to at least try out Oola, make your pitch. What is the 30-second pitch why someone should check out Oola?
First off, the learning curve is super short. If you're used to Chrome, it'll work perfectly for you. The concepts are the same. It's built on top of the same Chromium engine. We just had to strip out a bunch of the privacy stuff, but your tabs are the same. The way your daily work works is not going to be any different. It's not like when you use Safari. It's just a whole different interface. So in that sense, you got nothing really to lose. And the second piece is, take back your kind of privacy and just don't get surveilled without at least getting paid back for it. It's just kind of doing the right thing for yourself. Try it out. Oola.com.
Very, very good. Get some Ginza, what are those called knives? The Ginza? Whatever. Yeah, sorry, we're good.